All right. And we are live.
And we are live. And this is episode 38, everyone. Welcome.
38.
This is a Spoken Openness podcast. We're going with a quote. As usual, as now is a beautiful part of our culture.
It is. The spoken openness culture, It's part of our traditions, part of our built-in
ritualistic approach.
Habits.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
The RA.
The RA. Let's do it. So this is from CGJ, which is Carl G. Jung. I think most people say Jung.
Yep.
Right? Do you think that's generally accurate?
Yeah.
Most people.
Yeah, I've heard some people they say that it's actually Carl Junga.
Junga. Yes, that makes sense because.
But I don't know if that's accurate, and I think I'll just go with Jung.
Well, I've studied a little bit of the history and development throughout the times of the word, symbol, pronunciation and sound origin of G. So it makes sense that Jung is actually Junga. You know?
Big G.
Yeah. Anyway, let's do this. Shall we proceed? Okay.
Some would say that this is besides the point.
Or you can just say, I digress, and move on. Okay. This is the reason why I take carefully into account the symbols produced by the unconscious mind. They're the only things able to convince the critical mind of modern people. They are convincing for very old-fashioned reasons. They are overwhelming, which is an English rendering of the Latin word convincere. The thing that cures a neurosis must be as convincing as the neurosis, and since the latter is only too real, the helpful dream experience must be of equal reality.
The dream experience must be of equal reality?
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Can you say that one more? Can you do that? Can you say that one more time?
So I'm going back to not the whole quote, but the last sentence.
Sure.
He's saying the thing that cures a neurosis must be as convincing as the neurosis. And since the latter is only too real, the helpful dream experience must be of equal reality. And actually, dream is in between parentheses. So you could also read, the helpful experience must be of equal reality. He's adding that as a subtext, as somehow like an added word, an addition for you to consider. Yeah.
We're gonna start this podcast with a quote. This is from Jorge Bernard Shaw. Jorge Bernard Shaw said, "Beware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance." Beware of false knowledge. That's a long quote. It is more dangerous than ignorance. It's the longest one we've done. You just have to bear with us. I'm confused about the dream thing because if he's talking about some kind of, I think that I'm misunderstanding this mostly. He's saying that the reality within the dream is the thing that needs to be as convincing as the neuroses to combat the neuroses.
Can you say that again?
Well, he said that the reality has to be just as convincing as the neuroses to cure the neuroses.
The reality that cures the neurosis should be as convincing. The reality that cures the neuroses. That's also what I'm understanding.
But then why is he talking about dreams? Saying that dreams.
Because he's talking about symbols.
Dreams are,
the beginning of the quote is.
Yeah, I missed the beginning.
The reason why I take carefully into account the symbols produced by the unconscious mind.
Okay.
They're the only things able to convince the critical mind of modern people. He's talking about each and every one of us. We have a highly critical mind, and he's saying that the only things able to convince the critical mind Convinced of what? I'm not sure. I guess that's linked to the reality that is supposed to heal the or cure the neurosis, right? But he's saying that
Right.
dreams, actually symbols, they are convincing for very old reasons. They are overwhelming, is the word he's using, which is an English rendering of the Latin word convincere, which is that symbols have a certain power or capability embedded in them that transcend, I guess, a rational oriented worldview.
Yeah, I guess that would be the concept of archetypal
Mm-hmm.
symbols. These these um, these symbols and these patterns that are so embedded within our consciousness
Yeah.
as a human animal that's been developed as we emerged into consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's the the origins and history of consciousness breaks down
You're
that
talking about
the theory,
Newman's book?
Eric Neumann, the
Yeah.
theory
Okay.
that as we emerged from a unconscious, quote unquote unconscious pre-human animal,
Mm-hmm.
basically someone that was not aware of their own ego,
Right.
someone that was in flow reaction, like, you know, you could argue that's related to living in the present kind of a thing, but you're just not aware of the future. You're not aware of you as an individual
Sure.
that's separated from other things, as an ego that can imagine the future and test hypotheses and plan and do all these kind of things,
Yeah.
these advanced human moves, and that as we emerged into
So,
consciousness,
mm-hmm.
and this recognition of ourselves as individuals, that it followed a sequence of archetypal imagery. Things that are represented in archetypal imagery are things that happened to the human consciousness as it emerged. So, like the
And it happened
Ouroboros.
repeatedly throughout, yeah, a long period of time. Right? I'm sorry,
Happened.
I'm adding to what you're saying, but maybe you don't agree.
I think that well, I'm not sure. What do you mean by that? What happened repeatedly?
You're saying the symbols are representing things that happened to ourselves as we evolved, correct?
Yeah. Exactly.
No, I just said they repeatedly happened. That's why they kind of stuck,
but
right?
once a stage had passed, it didn't happen again.
Okay, yeah, that
we
totally
were
makes
now
sense. Okay. Well,
like
maybe cycles do
once
repeat themselves, right?
I agree,
Okay.
but what they are saying is that the emergence of consciousness, it's already out. It's already happened. We're here. We're at a stage now where we develop consciously with an ego and we understand ourselves as separate, and that's already like we can't go back. There's a overly hyped dream to revert back to a total state of
Yes.
non-individuality, which we've talked about a little bit before, and there's definitely a lot of
There's
attractiveness.
a deep desire to go back to the
Yes.
the felt presence of direct experience.
Exactly.
Yes.
But just to finish this ramble is that these archetypes, like the Ouroboros, is like the one, and like one being divided into two is what is the separation of
The
oneness, or
vesicopizes.
yeah, and that these stages of imagery and symbols that are known now as archetypal symbols, opposites, descent to the underworld,
Yeah.
sun and moon, these things are representative because they are they're so repetitive, and they're so ancient because they've occurred since the emergence of ourselves as proto hominids into a species that has individualized egos as part of our consciousness. And so maybe what is Mr. Hunga is saying is that in your dreams, when you're calling upon these symboles, you are tapping into things that are the most convincing because they're so ingrained and our bodies are literally hardwired, evolutionarily speaking, to respond to those archetypal symbols because we have no choice. They're so...
Yeah, we have no choice. You can't decide whether your body goes through REM sleep or not. It just does that naturally. And so it... Hopefully. I mean...
You get a nice
Of course,
sleep.
there's exceptions, of course. But I mean, almost everyone has a relationship with their dreams. Or had it at some point before we maybe lost contact or started...
Even if they're unaware.
Started numbing the process, I guess. But then you can unnumb the process and go and reconnect with your dreams. But what I'm saying is, it's a thing, it's an experience that's there for everyone, or except there's like medical exceptions. I have no idea, there probably are, but let's say everyone can have a dream experience, and the language of that experience is symbolic by nature. And so that's, I guess, for one, and on one side is like evidence of the factual nature of the quote, what Mr. Junga is referring to.
That's the Junga argument, is that they are fundamental to they are a natural product, and that when we dream, it's not because we have seen
randomness.
Stories and we culturally embedded these symbols. That hypothesis and that line of thinking is that no, they're ingrained in our subconscious because they were produced as we evolved into consciousness, and therefore they are ingrained. That those patterns are not cultural, they're ingrained.
Of course, there's debate on how that came to be,
or if that happened.
Exactly. Like exactly the origin and the why. But the how is pretty self-evident. And the fact that, I don't know, for example, nightmares are really interesting to me, because the fact that someone calls a dream a nightmare is because the message of the dream, and this is allegedly, of course, that there's a dream in the message, going back to that same hypothesis, right? But the fact that there was a message, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't be a nightmare. There was a story, there was a narrative, there were symbols there, and
maybe scary ones.
But that's why it's a nightmare, right? Why is it a nightmare? Because you are not ready to have that experience, or there's occult information, hidden information that you're not yet able to look at with neutral perspective.
I like this. And also, and maybe not only that you're not prepared, although I really like this idea of resistance being the cause of the converting or the interpreting of the phenomena of the underlying meaning being converted into scary and unpleasant situations. I like the idea of that being caused by a resistance or an unwillingness to face whatever the thing is. And I also I just wanted to add the notion that because it's coming from the unconscious or the subconscious, it's I like the idea of these things that you know that you don't know you know yet, and these things that you haven't put into words, or you haven't taken these disconnected things that your brain is starting to realize there's a pattern, or there's it knows something before you know that you know the thing, and so that the idea is that that's emerging through the dream, and you haven't conceptualized it yet in something that's simple and sentences, and that you can be like, that's the thing, that's what the interpretation of the whole dream interpretation thing would be about, is like, hey, you haven't put this into words or ideas yet, but I really like this, and this is separate, and I know that I'm just adding, but I really like the idea of that there are things that are being worked on in the background processes of your consciousness that you haven't dialed in yet and brought to the front
exactly
to confront.
Agree. Totally agree. And I think that's what the dream is helping you to do, to make the unconscious conscious, to go from dark to light on issues that you're going through, because the
D to L conversion.
The what?
The D to L conversion.
I like
the
that.
dark to light conversion. Yeah.
So maybe the contents of the dream are of a particular importance and value, and maybe that's why your unconscious mind is presenting that information to you in a manner that will be impactful, that will maybe shock you, and you'll remember that experience at least for a couple of hours after you wake up.
Yeah.
It's
like you're...
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, usually dreams fade away fast, but nightmares, you tend to remember them. And I think there's a very specific reason that we might be exploring at the moment.
Do you think it's the same reason that we remember bad things more than we remember good things in general, as a
like survival mechanism to? Yeah,
maybe.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
hey,
I mean,
we gotta learn from this.
We need to be more aware of mistakes than I guess like positive stuff, because
I think both.
Yes. I mean, balance is always key. But I guess what I'm saying is we tend to focus more on mistakes because if we solve mistakes, there's less suffering. We like
hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yes. Well, if the system, if you were willing to face the thing and do the work and figure out put your finger on exactly what the thing is and to make the adjustments, the idea would be that you would begin to alleviate the potential of that, or mitigate the potential that from happening in the future again.
Sure.
Which is the ideal. I really like the idea that that's like some part of your unconscious is like, you're not listening. Like, you're not listening. Do I have to put this in a spooky, do I have to make this spooky and put in a foggy, scary guy coming to get you? Or like,
dude, that's exactly it.
It's like, what do I have to do to make you look at this thing?
Right.
Like, maybe you don't understand it yet, but I understand it already, and you just have to put it into the stupid language words, and you need to put it into your conscious understanding. But just have a look at this. Like, I'll make it super spooky.
And it's also emotional, right? It's not only intellectual. The fact that you're living, the dream is real while it's happening, unless it's a lucid dream. But if it's a lucid nightmares are a whole different level. I just think we should focus on just nightmares. You're not aware that it's a dream.
Yeah. The lucid thing is like it's like, I don't really, it's the next level.
Yeah. But just as a little bit of context, I read the quote from a book that I'm going through for a second time. And it's like it's like a whole different book right now than the things that I had previously highlighted. I love that. But what I'm saying is Dr. Jeremy Taylor has been helping people to heal trauma and a lot of psychological obstacles, let's say, through dream
Nice.
work. And
Yep.
I came across a great testimony that is exactly what we're talking about. So let's say Jane Doe
Yeah.
had a very strong. Hold on, I should say tell you what she dreamt first. And the guy was teaching her to go through a repetitive nightmare that she didn't understand, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
nightmare was just like a big, very scary dragon-like monster just
Yeah.
chasing her through like an infinite path of, and then she
Yeah.
would just like wake up, kind of like screaming and terrified that just when the monster was like about to, I don't know, eat her or something.
Yeah.
So she was having this repetitive nightmare, and this guy taught her to ask. Well, first of all, she was going through like the basic training of becoming lucid, which is like starting your journal and figuring out patterns, and like
Mm-hmm.
then she started having worse nightmares because they were more vivid, not lucid yet, but way more vivid. And
Mm-hmm.
before the nightmare got resolved, it got worse because I mean she was getting close to being able to get lucid, and that means
Yep.
you're like way more. What is it like retention? So the dream just feels like way more real.
Okay.
Basically, she was able to turn around in the middle of the dream and ask and like see the thing for the first
Yeah.
time, face the thing for the first
Mm.
time,
Yeah.
and she asked the thing. Well, first of all, it was like a big, very scary dragon,
Yeah.
but he was filled with like mucus and ash and
Ugh.
herbal, and she asked, "Why are you chasing me?" And the monster
Yeah.
said, "I'm your smoking addiction." And
Mm.
allegedly, she stopped smoking after she asked the question and realized that the monster that had been hunting her in this repetitive nightmares was actually trying to tell her something. So that
Mm-hmm.
might
It
be
was.
actual
Yeah.
testimony of this phenomena,
Mm.
and maybe we could
Mm-hmm.
all use that to get better in many different areas of our lives, or at least one that's
Mm.
very important if we pay attention, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
And that requires the ability to play around in that space,
Hmm.
the ability to um, yeah, to be conscious or aware of dreams. It's hard for me to speculate because I maybe realized that I was dreaming twice a year and I don't remember what the
Hmm.
I don't I have no zero relationship of or occurrences,
Hmm.
but but in I am positive in the ability through stuff like meditation and process and directing will and energy towards it, the potential to maybe cultivate some of that. That's the hopeful
Yeah,
mindset.
and I totally see that as a great alternative for
But
dream work.
I also think that uh, you're playing in this space of the unconscious when you're being creative and when you're
Nice, for sure. Yeah.
producing writing or music
Hmm.
or like artistic endeavors. I think you're also tapping into stuff that you naturally wouldn't say, or not that you wouldn't say, but that it's not yet at a conceptual level to say,
Yeah.
because you it's in the background, it's in development, um and it's on a different plane of
Hmm.
understanding. It's in
Yeah.
precognition phase,
Mhm.
predigestion. Yeah.
I agree. And it sometimes things seem obvious once you've walked the through the process, uh,
Yes.
or after you've walked through the process. But
Yes.
sometimes, like in meditation or journaling, you'll arrive at a very simple conclusion. But the fact that you kind of went through the thought process makes
Mm-hmm.
it way more valuable and deep and
Hmm.
helpful for what you're going through at the moment. So maybe,
Ye-
maybe core wisdom can actually be reduced to very simple and straightforward realizations, but we need to find those again and again through different phases of life and different context.
And also, I think the funny thing that happens is as soon as it's at a place where you can think about it with words and you can make statements about it and you can conceptualize it in that way, it seems obvious because part of you recognizes that you already knew, that you're just, it feels as if you're just saying something that you already knew, but it's just that you didn't have that connection to the part of you that knew it already. But
Right.
your ego is still willing to accept the victory of being like, no, I already knew that. It's like, no, you didn't know that yet.
Yeah.
You were waiting to have it into a conceptual framework that you work within.
Yes. Yes.
Would you say
Yes.
that would you say that the ego works within a framework of what? Language and coherent rational structures of cognition?
Well, I think cognition is a broader umbrella than ego.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I guess I'm trying to
yeah,
because I think
yeah.
I separated the ego.
I tend
I
to relate ego
made
with
yeah,
intellect,
sure.
and so
Yes.
language. I think language, pattern recognition, labeling,
Yeah. Opinion. Yeah. Think processing. But
processing, past references a hundred
uh-huh.
times a second, and matching it with
Yeah.
current input.
Yeah.
So,
I separated
mhm,
um I separated the ego and I put it into the category that is totally unaware of the subconscious playground that is in development, and that the ego is waiting on standby until it is able to, or until the conceptualization or
mhm,
feeling
mhm.
or substructure of the unconscious is at a stage that is ready to be read by the ego. Like, I'm making a
Right.
claim now that with no basis in anything, that the ego is like a computer that can only read something once it's at a certain stage, and that
Huh.
the
Mhm.
ego is the part of you, the individualized component that
Maybe okay. Maybe you like my analogy. Well, not my analogy. I'm just thinking about it right now this way. If we're going with the, let's say, desktop computer with a computer reference, the ego would be your desktop, or actually not the actual desktop folder, or more like the screen, the pixels of the screen. But the pixels of the screen are just one component. There's the cables that connect to the motherboard, and then there's the blah 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 blah.
yeah.
Um, but well, maybe the ego is more like the RAM memory, and the the screen and the pixels are more like the train of thought, the actual train of thought as you experience it on the go. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's I see it as, to continue this metaphor, I see it as the operating system that understands software that you download for that operating system.
Yes, operating system, I think it's correct. And then the unconscious mind would be the internet.
The unconscious mind is like not written in the coding language
Of the SO.
that the OS
Yeah.
that the OS is dealing with. And so
Yeah.
basically your unconscious mind is working on converting that into the operating system language. And then once it's there, your ego is like, oh yeah, I can read that, and I always knew that, and that's the info. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like, yeah.
I think it's a closed system, like a unified system, and there's a constant dancing around, or let's say a battle between each state. So maybe when we're in deep sleep, we are in the unconscious realm, which is consciousness, is a part of consciousness, but there's no information. It's just probably like similar to the opposite, which is the complete opposite, which would be like hyper consciousness or meta consciousness. So in between, you've got consciousness and subconscious. So unconscious at the bottom, and then you move towards the top, and then you have the subconscious, which maybe is more like you're halfway to so maybe you deep sleep, there's no information, no recall, time is an illusion, or actually more like no time. But then RAM would be subconscious, which there's time, but not as it is experienced in the conscious, which is purely chronological and linear. Time in the subconscious is more like it's subjective time, right? And so
because the operating system of the ego is working at time, seconds, and the subconscious mind is like, no, I'm not coding in that software.
Right.
I don't work with the same clock.
Exactly. It's more symbols and emotions and storylines and experiences and sensory information.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I like that.
Unconscious, subconscious, the conscious, and then the meta-conscious or hyper-conscious.
Is there only one step above?
I think maybe you can break it down into multiples, but in a broader...
It should be 7. In my mind, it should be 7.
It should be G. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, this is nice.
I think if you could boil it down to the essentials, you've got sub, con, and metacon.
What's metacon?
That's the conscious awareness of the conscious experience. So that's consciousness squared.
Can I go full loop? Because if you open enough in conscious, you end up back at the beginning of unconscious.
Right, that's what I said. That's why I said that it's the same.
I was in my head, then I wasn't really listening properly.
It's eating its tail. I agree.
Full circle. But I think there's somewhere above, and now this is me interpreting and wanting to add above and below to these concepts, but I think there's something above consciousness. Because And not just above, but compartmentalized. Because when we talk about consciousness, there is status quo, flow, reaction consciousness. And then there is present, coherent, conscious, careful presence consciousness.
Yeah.
And those aren't the same consciousness, even though they're both functioning, I guess, on the same operating system. But then...
What do you think is the difference? Are you saying this is different from consciousness and let's stick to meta-consciousness, right?
I'm trying to explore if there is more than just the conscious and then meta-conscious. And what, if there's stages in there, or if there's different aspects, or if there's different
and
ways to conceptualize.
And I agree. And I think it is.
I definitely think the end is connecting the tail of getting to unconsciousness again.
What's in between that and conscious, or what we're calling just daytime.
Daytime protocol.
Nice. DTP.
Yes.
Okay.
And the well, here's a question. When you're meditating, okay, and you're like, I'm gonna elevate my consciousness, I'm gonna boost up my chakras, and I'm gonna align with the sun, and
fly like an
eagle
into the sea.
I'm gonna fly like an eagle. I'm Neo. I'm about to burst through the matrix. Are you going back down into less consciousness to head towards disconnecting with time, focusing on sensory input as separate from time, and going more unconscious? Or are you going upwards and going super conscious, more awareness, more time? Time is more precise. Breathing, you become more aware of the operating system of if it goes from time doesn't exist, time is crazy,
time is speeding up
and and like all over the place. Maybe this is like the quantum. When you're subconscious, you're like in quantum. And then as you move up into consciousness and maybe higher, you're going very Newtonian physics.
Yeah.
But my question, and now I'm adding layers of my hypothesis and I'm having fun going quantum and Newtonian. But in your mind, when you meditate, do you think you're going... What direction are you going in the hierarchy of conscious
I've always
planes?
thought as going higher rather than lower. Of course,
that's the...
Because I tend to think that sleep and let's say, what's the word for anesthesia? Something like anesthesia and sleep, or maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. This is just me imagining that something like the heroin experience is also going down into unconscious.
Like sedative.
Yeah. And although the end and the beginning are connected, or the foundation and the... Like it's not a why. It's not only like a vertical line.
It's a how.
It is a how. It is a toroidal.
Dude, definitely, it's definitely toroidal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We're on the same page here. Okay, so...
Of course. We're in the same torus.
I think if you start going observer...
When it eats its own tail, it's an aurora torus.
Sorry, what was that?
When it eats its own tail in our conceptual framework, it's the aurora torus.
Aurora Taurus. Nice. Aura Taurus.
Yeah, Aura Taurus field.
I love it. What's the question then? Okay, no, the question is...
I forgot, I'm sorry.
Through meditation, let's say meditation awakening process, is not going to the bottom of things, but going to the no, this is the wrong way to put it. Hold on. Because many people think of meditation
heightened
go
consciousness.
to the core. Go to the center.
But it's also like transcendental meditation. It's like you're moving above your bodily awareness.
That tag name is totally suggestive of up, right? Transcendent.
Yes, of course.
Move beyond.
It's like you're going through the body, through presence into consciousness, elevation. That's the narrative of a lot of meditation. I would say,
through your neck, through your communication,
up the 33 vertebrae.
Right. So you gotta transcend language.
Yep.
And then you gotta go into vision, but then there's beyond vision. There's like crown consciousness, which then maybe leads to going back in the toroidal.
Yeah. Yeah. But
the difference between here and here and here, there's a big difference.
Yeah. And then the idea, I guess, is that you are letting the toroidal field vibrate, but you're letting it like a wave. You're trying to hang right at the top of the very, very tippy top of the toroidal field.
Yes.
And as it continues to flow the energy, you maintain concentration and full presence at the peak of the toroidal boundary layer.
And you can't really escape, or you can't there's no 100% transcendence, I think, because
you can't leave the toroidal field.
Exactly, yeah. And intellect and ego will make themselves present again as soon as possible, right? So maybe you're there, you focalize it for a moment, which subjectively could feel like a very short time or very long time. It depends, I guess.
Yeah.
But you're still gonna move around. It's always moving. You can't stay there.
Yeah.
I guess.
You can't stay there. You can try through very, very serious focus and practice to see if you can maintain your seat of consciousness at the very top of what you consider to be
the shunya state, the state of zero.
Yes.
The 0 point.
Okay, but my question is still, let's say conceptually, and this is all just conceptual jargon, but in this conceptual framework, let's say that you are riding right at the top of the toroidal conscious field and you're just buzzing there. You're at the very center of the hurricane that's spinning in both directions and you're feeling the energy flowing and you're there.
Yeah.
All right. Is that more conscious? Is that above? Is that
I don't think
quote unquote a higher state?
If you understand it's a toroidal or an Ouroboros map, then there's no going forward, there's no going backwards, there's no up, there's no down. It's a process. It's a part of a cycle. It's like there's no destination. We tend to think that the destination is the nirvana state, the blissful moment where the mind is silent and the glandular system is producing all of this beautiful juices for your mind to
Yes.
enjoy, and that's beautiful. But that only happens when intellect is calmed and centered, and I guess more like a extremely flat, beautiful and calm pond, and
Yes.
way less than like white. What is it, like white? What do they call them? The surfers, the white part of the wave. You know, the
Uh,
espuma,
yeah, yeah.
espuma. I don't know the
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the whitewash, the not
Hmm.
the crashed wave.
Yeah, it's similar to the
Um,
what is it produced by soap? When you go like this with soap, you create what?
foam.
Foam, right? So
Yeah,
water can
bubbles.
become like almost like soap, like that part of that white part of the wave where after it
Yeah,
crashes,
soapy.
same matter, different state. One is completely calm and the other is completely agitated. So I
Soapy
guess
consciousness.
before you can maybe experience blissful states of white, I don't know, whatever. Everyone has like a different word for that.
Yeah.
And then if you try to put
Yes.
language into that, it's not that anymore. But before you
Yes.
can get there, you need to take control of the relationship, your relationship with your mental processes, your train of thought,
Definitely.
your constant
Yep.
train of thought. Like that's, I
Yep.
think that's way more of a goal, to have the relationship constantly nurtured and balanced instead of wanting to always experience a
Yeah.
state of bliss, right?
Yes. I agree. I also like the idea that, or something that we could play with, is this notion that, okay, we're trying to figure out like maybe the language of sub conscious, like all that stuff is a hierarchy that doesn't necessarily need to be like less real, less important. And this is, I guess, Jung's argument. I'm is that these things are just as important and just as meaningful, and the goal isn't to avoid and to say, oh, that is subconscious, and and that the end goal isn't total
Yeah.
existence in consciousness if it's on the hierarchy in the middle, but to experience the different states and to
Mm-hmm.
find something meaningful that transcends all planes.
Hmm. And it seems that the unconscious is
Unify
de-
the planes.
unified what?
Unify the planes.
Hmm. Right. And I think that's what dreams are helping us to do,
Yeah.
to go through that, achieve that integral integrity, integrating all aspects into a beautiful dance.
Yes.
But there is what's it's crazy that it's like, yeah, the unconscious, the subconscious is desperately trying to speak to the conscious.
I like that idea. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
is like we've got our own life lifesaver.
Yeah, we're just like the ego thinks that, like, hey, if you can't put it into the right coding language, I don't want to hear about it, or I don't we it's like, look, you're not like rational, you haven't written the code yet. I'm not even going to pay attention to it.
Hmm.
And the subconscious is like, look, you're the one that has to play a part in writing the code here. I'm pulling all of these things together, these different aspects that are maybe right now seemingly disconnected. This is the heavy lifting. I'm doing this in the background. I just need you to finish the code here, connect the dots, and pay attention because there's something important here. That's kind of the message from the subconscious. It's like, help me connect the dots, because you're the one that's the dot connector. I'm pulling these things together. Yeah.
It's up to you to realize and take responsibility for the fact that you can change things around if you really want to.
Right.
Which is scary. It's a scary thought to have some control over destiny, at least a percentage of that.
And it's also, the first step is to acknowledge that there's something important down there in the sub. First step is to acknowledge that there's something there's something valuable there.
Nice. Yeah, at least start paying a little bit more of attention, realizing that up is not better necessarily. We always want to go to meta-conscious, but maybe going into the depths of the subconscious, that's where the change happens, because I think that also has negative patterns that are engraved in the subconscious as well as the conscious. So this is top. This is what
the top. Sorry, the top state of like our hyper focus on the transcendent meditative unification, dissolution of ego experience, omniscient dissolution.
Nice.
That is like that's like it has uses, and I would like to discuss maybe the uses, but it's kind of just like vacation. I like it. It calms the mind. But what we're talking about here and what you're talking about is like, but the work about actually looking for the ingredients that you can actually become aware of, connect the dots, and then create new meals in your consciousness and create new software and adapt new software that can improve upon your experience of the world, then that's where the magic is. And that's where, if you're inclined to want to orient yourself towards that, then that's where you gotta get your hands dirty, in the underworld and in the sub.
And getting your hands dirty, I've always been fascinating with, I've never been able to achieve this, but some Buddhist monks get in the practice of lucid dreaming and meditating and chanting in their dreams. So that idea of going directly into the subconscious and then do some, let's call it healing or reprogramming, whatever, inside the subconscious directly, that seems like powerful. Do you think that can possibly, I don't see how that doesn't change the actual conscious experience directly.
That's kind of like, in my mind, I'm almost like that's going into where all this useful information is and being like, I'm not going to look at it. I'm just going to vacation within this archetypal landscape and just ignore it and just be like, I'm going to meditate and ignore everything and transcend even in the subconscious.
Maybe that's actual reprogramming, and through repetition, there's a Hindu concept which is japa. Japa is repetition, but there's another concept which is japa, which is without repetition, which is whenever, let's say, you get into chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, and then a month after you're walking down the street, something is happening, and then you realize that instead of having a train of thought that is, oh, I need to this and like your usual train of thought, your mind is singing without you actually singing, which is it's repeating the mantra without you doing the repetition anymore. And so that seems like the nail that takes out another nail, you know, is the repetitions are so engraved that the only thing that can take them out is like an other repetition. And then if you repeat that long enough and frequently enough, it'll become the repetition that is now going on without you repeating it.
Right.
Whoa.
And I think I would like to, I mean, this is something to explore, is the efficacy of that approach. I don't necessarily know if the end goal or something that I would desire is just to be singing the same song in my head all day, but maybe the function of that technique we could explore with a designer mindset of how can we utilize this as a process to use to conceptualize a change, to utilize it as a tool to progress towards that goal and use it as a tool for that purpose. I think that's a great discussion that I would like to
same.
explore.
I think it's a great current debate as well. If like what's more efficient? Should you be doing transcendental meditation, or should you be doing chanting, or should you be doing both? And then also trying to increase your dream recall, and
or just yoga, because yoga is meditation,
exactly.
or just everybody has their own.
Or is it better that you're doing free flow writing, because then you're actually engaging with your actual thought processes, and you're more likely to encounter a real demon through your etc. So this is the thing that I love having these discussions. One of the reasons I like having these discussions is because it makes you become conscious about the why so much. It's like, no, there isn't anything better than another thing. I mean, there isn't any. It's like, for what purpose? Like, why? Like, what are you trying to achieve? It's like people are always like, oh, like, and this happens so much in nutrition, but it's like, what is the best diet? It's like, what are you trying to do? What kind of a day do you have? Are you doing some crazy exercise, or are you just sitting down? Like, it's the same as like with all of these things. It's like, these are all tools, and that's why I like discussing about these things in the concept of a toolbox. Totally.
Because it's like your Inspector Gadget. You're Inspector Gadget, and you have something that you're trying to do. What things are you going to deploy, like magic tricks, conceptual magic tricks, and habit patterns that you want to install?
Nice.
To realize something that you've manifested.
Yes. Yeah. And with same with nutrition. We tend to think that the goal is just like health, to be healthy.
Right.
Same with meditation. We tend to be like, the goal is to put your mind blank or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Clear your mind.
Right. It's a process.
Down.
Now we realize there's no goal. What are you trying to achieve? What tools do you need? In what process and context are you currently dealing with? Yeah,
and this isn't some brilliant insight of like, what's it for? Like, it's just, it's a very useful mindset, and I like to explore things that approach these techniques that seem to have efficacy, but people are like, what people are using them for, I don't want, or I have no interest in. But it's like, okay, but let's not dismiss the tool.
Exactly.
Or the process, even if the end goal isn't what you are all about. Let's check out the tool and see if we can utilize these different things for whatever you design is what you want to reach.
Of course. I think.
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the right approach most of the time. In most categories, if you try to look at things without attachment, that to the reason why it's generally being used for, or what most people think a tool should be used for. I think if you cultivate detachment from assumptions and just be like tool, then you're way more open to using that tool effectively.
Yes.
And maybe that's just exactly as you point out, just a mindset. It's an approach to life, right?
And it has an element of like improv too. It's like, you know, that game where you stand around in a circle and someone's like, this is a phone. And someone's like, this isn't a phone, it's a seat. And then someone's like, this isn't a seat. And then you like reinterpret whatever object is being passed around the room.
Yeah.
And it's an imagination game. That's kind of like, that's the kind of mindset that we're talking about too, where it's like, you see all these things of like, oh, tool for this, and people are using it this way. It's like, no, but tool for also this or this. Check it out, try it out, see what it can do for what your directed action requires or is hoping for.
Right. Which maybe that's the most difficult part of it all. If you don't, if you
clarifying
don't
where you're trying to get,
recognize and clarify the, let's say, problem, or the cause, actually the cause of the problem is way more precise. Then you can't decide on a destination if you don't know the cause of the problem. And then it's like you can't.
That's what dreams are for.
A doctor can't point out a recipe without having the proper diagnosis first.
Yes.
So proper diagnosis is so important before you start even looking at possible tools, right?
And diagnosis does not stop at the symptoms.
Yes, exactly. Causality is important.
Yes. Nice, man. I think there's a lot here. I think we can, often we'll go by, it's like a week will go by and I'll forget what we were talking about. But I'd like to try to hold on to this train of thought and see if we can board one more time and see where it gets us. Same.
Great convo.
Thanks for the chat.
Thanks for the space time.
I'll see you on
the next
39.
one. All right. Peace out.
Peace.